So welcome everybody to this latest video on 162 Math, and in this video we'll be reviewing the topic of trigonometry using the sine rule at higher GCSE level. Now in this video we'll go over what you need to know before going through some exam style questions which you can download by clicking on the link in the description below, which I strongly recommend you do just to see how much you know and how much you don't know about this topic. Now before we get started working through some questions related to the sine rule, let's have just a quick glance at what it is we need to revise when revising sine rule. Now the first thing is, when do you actually use it? Well, we use it when you've got non-right angle triangles and that you are given two sides and two angles where one of them is what you wanted or has been labelled X, let's say. And as you can see from the triangles, it's exactly the same as the one that we use for the cosine rule and also the one that will be given to you in the insert of your exam. Now in terms of the formula, technically you are given two variations of this particular formula. You can be given where the sides are at the numerator and the angles are in the denominator, or you can be given a formula where the angles are at the numerator and the sides are at the denominator. Now also, all three fractions are always going to be given. However, you will only ever need to use two. So you only use two of the three fractions. Now, if you're comfortable with your labeling, technically I would ditch the one with the C and just use this formula here. Now the reason why in some revision guides and some websites they give you two variations, it basically tells you, or basically instruction on what to do next. So sometimes if the angle is at the top, then it's quite easy for you to make that the subject, whereas if what you're wanting is in the denominator, like with SOHCAHTOA trig, it can be quite confusing as to when you divide and when you multiply. Now, top tip from me is that if you do use this particular arrangement of the formula, once you've substituted the numbers in, if you cross multiply, that will eliminate all fractions. And then all that's left for you to do is to make whatever you need to solve the subject to then go on and answer the question correctly. Now, if that makes absolutely zero sense, do not worry. When we go through some example questions, I'll refer to this and you can see hopefully exactly what I mean. Now, another variation that you need to be able to know is the area of a triangle. Now when you do not know the perpendicular height of a triangle, now what I mean by the perpendicular height of a triangle, it basically means if you take one point, draw a perpendicular bisector to the other side, that there is the perpendicular height of the triangle. Now depending on what is classed as the base, now the base is basically what is touching the surface. So for example, if A was the base, then the height of this triangle would be this length here. I could say, I'd say this length here is going to be the height of the triangle. Just pull that H there, and if the other side was the height, then again I'd be drawing a perpendicular line. So that's why it's called the perpendicular height. So if I know the height of the triangle then and a base, then all I need to do is just do half base times height, or base times height divided by 2, whichever floats your boat, and I'd use that. However, if you're not given the height, then the formula to work out the area of the triangle is to use this formula here. And again, this formula will be given to you in your exam paper. Now, a good top tip is that to always check to make sure you have got the height, because what you don't want to do is once you know a complicated formula to work out the area of a triangle, you automatically think that you have to use this formula. Now, depending on where the question is and the type of question, there'll be circumstances in where you can just use base times height divided by 2, but there'll also be times where you have to use this trigonometric formula for the area of a triangle. So try not to always just think that when you're asked to find the area of a triangle that you're always going to use this formula. It should work in all instances, but if you know the height and you know the base, then just go for base times height divided by 2 rather than half AB sine C. So let's go straight into question 1. A little reminder, if you want access to these questions, all you need to do is just click on the link in the description below and you can have access to these questions for free. So looking at question 1A, it says write down the sine rule for the above triangle. So for this, we've got our triangle, maybe in different orientation to what we're used to, but basically I can just write A over sine A equals B over sine B equals C over sine C. It then says for the triangle above, write down a formula for the area of a triangle which includes the term sine C. So this is the sine C that I'm wanting, so I can then use half AB sine C. So it's just going to be a half AB sine C. And that's it. Now, the reason why they wrote sine C, because they don't want you using sine A or sine B. They just basically want you to use this particular angle, which therefore means that you have to use these two sides. Now, if the triangle was labelled with different letters, I'll just have to use my ability to be able to adjust my alphabetic skills to rearrange the wording of the formula. Moving on to question 2, it says work out the value of x. So this is more of a traditional sine rule question where I've got two angles, I've got two sides, and one of them is x. So that's why I know that this is going to be a sine rule rather than the cosine rule, because with the cosine rule I've got three sides and an angle. Well, I don't know what the third side is and I don't need to find it, so that's why it's not a cosine rule question. So go into this, because once you've established it's a sine rule, what we then want to do is start with an angle. So I'm just going to label this as A, this will be little a, this will be B, and this will be capital B. Remember, your capital letters are the angles, lowercase letters are the sides. So then substituting this into the sine rule question, formula I should say, I get this. So substituting numbers in now. Will I get marks for writing this? No, because you're given it, you're not going to be worth any marks, but you will be given marks for the use of that formula. So you can go straight into substituting numbers in. So I've got 12 over sine 40 equals x over sine 50. Now, once you've substituted in, this is where you cross multiply. And by cross multiplying, you multiply the numerator with the other denominator and the other numerator by the other denominator, hence creating the cross. And you're multiplying. And by doing this, what you're doing is eliminating that fraction element. So I've got 12 sine 50 equals x sine 40. And then what I then want to do is make x a subject. So I need to get rid of this sine 40. What's the sine 40 doing? Is multiplying. So the opposite would be to divide. So if I divide that by sine 40, I get x. So x equals 12 sine 50 divided by sine 40. And if I type that all into my calculator, which I'm going to do now, and again, if you want to use your fraction button, that's entirely up to you, or you could just do the numerator, press equals, and then divide by the denominator, in which, if you've done this correctly, you should have an answer of 14.3, and that's to one decimal place. Moving on to question 3, it says work out the size of angle BCA in this triangle. So again, the angle that I'm wanting to find is this angle here, which I'm just going to call x. So again, how do I know this is a sine rule question? Because I know two sides, two angles where one of them is x. So then labeling this up, I'm going to call this one A. So that's going to be A. This is going to be angle B, and that's going to be B. So then substituting numbers into the formula. So here we've got 5 over sine x equals, and it's going to be 9 over sine 48. So then from this, what I then need to do is cross multiply. So again, multiply this with this, that with that, in which I end up with 9 sine x equals 5 sine 48. I then want to take the 9 over, so I end up with sine x equals 5 sine 48 divided by 9. And then because I want to work out x, I can't divide by sine, so I need to inverse sine. So x equals the inverse sine. I don't know what I'm trying to write there, so let me just rub that out. So the inverse sine of 5 sine 48 divided by 9. Now, if you've already typed into your calculator, that's fine. So let me show you how I would enter this on my calculator. So I'd enter I'd set up a fraction of 5 sine 48, close bracket, scroll down, divided by 9, press equals, and then I want to do the inverse sine of that. So inverse sine of the answer, press equals, and it gives me 24.4 to one decimal place. So 24.4, and that's to one decimal place. Moving on to question 4, it says work out the area of this triangle, give your answer correct to one decimal place. So the question here is testing me which sides do I know. am I going to use? Am I going to use 22 or am I going to use 131? Now for this, the formula is half AB sine C. So the two sides are going to be A and B. So I'm going to call this is angle C, this is going to be A, and this is going to be B. So therefore the area is going to be a half times 10.4 times 6.7 multiplied by sine 131. And if I type that all into my calculator, so let's just go, I can use a half or 0.5, it's the same thing. So we've got 10.4 times 6.7 multiplied by sine 131 close bracket equals, and it comes up as 26.3, and that's to 1 decimal place. And I don't need to write 1 decimal place because it's told me write 1 decimal place. You just want to double make sure you have rounded that correctly, which I have. Moving on to question 5, it says work out the value of m in this triangle. So again, no, it's a sine rule because I know two sides and two angles. Now the problem with this particular question is that I need to know this angle first in order to use m. Now to work out a, I know that angles inside a triangle are 180, so to work out this angle, I'm just going to do 180 minus 42 minus 56, and if I type that all into my calculator, or if it's on non-calculator paper, I have to work it out myself, but it gives me an answer of 82. So then what I can then do is rub that out and write 82. So then I can use, to work out m, I need to know that angle. So then what I'm going to do, I'm going to use this side here, and this angle here, and this angle here. So then substituting it, I've got m over sine 82 equals 7.3 over, actually it's not that angle I need to use, it's this angle I need to use, of sine 56. So then cross multiplying, I get m sine 56 equals 7.3 sine 82. So then taking the sine 56 over to the side, I end up with 7.3 sine 82 divided by sine 56, and let me just plug that into my calculator. So 7.3 sine 82 over sine 56, press equals, and it comes up an answer of 8.7 to 1 decimal place. So m equals, and I've already forgot the number, it was 8.7 centimeters, and that's to 1 decimal place. Moving on to question 6, it says the area of a triangle ABC is 126.5 centimeters square. AB equals 22, BC equals 23. Work out the size of angle ABC. So let's first of all, we've not been given a triangle, so let's draw one. And let's call this A, let's call this B, and let's call this C. Now looking at the side A to B, that's 22. B to C is 23, and the angle that we're wanting is this angle here. Now from this we know that the area of the triangle is this. So here I've got half AB sine C equals 126.5. Now if I take A as being 23, B as being 22, I can then work out what angle C is going to be, which I'm going to call this here C. So then from this I can then do a half times 22 times 23 times sine C equals 126.5. Now the key thing with this is, note that although my triangle is labelled ABC, I've had to rearrange those letters so that it applies to the formula. So again, don't automatically think that angle A is going to be the A in the formula or B in the formula. You might have to remix it and rejig it so that it's more correct. So from this, what we then need to do, if I then just type this all into my calculator, it will give me a nice number, So let me just do just that. So I've got 0.5 times 22 times 23 gives me an answer of 253. So that's 253 times sine C equals 126.5. So then sine C equals 126.5 divided by 253. And if I then do C equals the inverse sine of 126.5 over 253, then if I get the calculator out, I've got the inverse sine and then open up the fraction of 126.5 over 253 equals, let me just scroll there, close bracket, gives me 30. So a nice whole number there. Moving on to question 7, it says the diagram below shows the quadrilateral ABCD. The line joining A and C is perpendicular to the line CD. Work out the size of angle X. So first things first, I need to work out what this side here is, AC. So if I just draw a triangle out and I draw AC, I can see that this is a right angle triangle and I'm wanting to work out what this side here is. So then labeling it up, I've got theta, I've got opposite, I've got the adjacent, so I'm going to be using tan. So tan 51 equals x over 14. So x equals 14 tan 51. Now I can leave the answer like this, or I can work it out what it is as a decimal, and 14 tan 51 is 17.2885619. Now from this I can just label this as 17.2885619. So then if I take that triangle out, this is angle X, this is 18, this is 17.288 blah blah blah, and this angle here is 32. So again I'm going to use the sine rule because I know two sides and two angles where one of them is X. So then it's going to be 17.288 and whatever you've rounded that number to over sine X equals 18 over sine 32. Then once I've done that, I then need to cross multiply. So I've got 17.288 multiplied by sine 32. Now the reason I put dots is just in case, depending on your rounding of this will depend on the accuracy of your answer. And then we've got equals 18 sine X. So that means that sine X is going to equal 17.288 times sine 32, all divided by 18. So then X equals the inverse sine of 17.288 times sine 32 over 18. Now note that I've been nowhere near a calculator apart from to work out that 17.288. So let me just show you how I'll type this into my calculator. So I'm going to try and be as accurate as possible. So I know that we've got 14 tan and it was 51. Now you could just use that number, but I'm going to keep that on my calculator, press equal. So that number is then saved as that. So if I then enter my fraction, press the ands, which is that 17.288 number, multiply that by sine 32, close bracket, scroll down to 18. So that'll give me what the fraction is, and it's between -1 and 1, so it's looking good so far. Then press shift, sine, the ands, close bracket, press equals, and there is my answer of 30.621 decimal place. And it's an angle, and that's to 1 decimal place, and there is my final answer for that one. Then moving on to question 8, it says that a boat is at B and is running out of fuel. There are two ports at port P and Q as shown in the diagram. Which port is closer to the boat? Now the boat is here, so we need to work out what length this is, and I need to work out what length this is. Now in terms of working this, well, basically I'm going to use the sine rule twice, and I'm going to use the bits of information. So to work out X, I'm going to use this side and this angle, and I first of all need to work out this angle here. So again, just like the previous question, 180 minus 60 minus 45, and that's going to give me an answer of 75. And I'm going to use this angle and this side. So then that then becomes x over sine 45 equals 27 over sine 75. Cross multiply and I get x sine 75 equals 27 sine 45. Then x equals 27 sine 45 divided by sine 75. So x equals, and again typing that all into my calculator, and I get an answer of 19.765 blah blah blah. Now I hope that rounding is good enough, but I'm going to leave it as it is there. So then the next thing for me then to do is to work out y. Now to work out y, I'm going to use this side and this angle and this side and this angle. So here I get y over sine 60 equals 27 over sine 75. And then cross multiplying, I get y sine 75 equals 27 sine 60. So then y equals 27 sine 60 over sine 75, and that gives me a y value of, and then 27, and it gives me an answer of 24.2 and a few there. So in terms of comparing, so the final answer, which of those answers is smaller, is x. So that means that they should use, so the boat should go to port P as it's a shorter distance. And there we go.